think there's a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through sometimes to start the mental health process that can be overwhelming enough, especially if you are mentally overwhelmed.
I believe that mental health is just as important as physical health, and it should be treated the same way. There's different levels of mental health professionals, and you have to find the right one for you. I work more in the coaching, so I don't take insurances,
Mhm.
which most coaches don't. Just make sure, again, that you search out those people that have the credentials behind them, because I feel like
Mhm.
in today's society, everybody says they're a coach, but we want to make sure that they really truly have the education behind it.
Yeah, that
Welcome
kind
to
of
the fitness
flows right
industry.
over to the fitness
They're
industry.
like, I lost 5 pounds. I
I'm a
saved my
coach
sister
now.
from suicide. I'm like, I don't actually think that means you can save everybody from suicide, but okay.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to Go Figure, the podcast where we cut the fluff, get real, and dive into everything fitness, health, and life. I'm Lori Fetrick, former American Gladiator Ice.
And I'm Ashley Randall, certified trainer, wellness coach, and your go-to for keeping it real about living your best life.
Here on Go Figure, we're busting myths, sharing truths, and having the conversations that make you stop and say, Go Figure.
From fitness fads to mindset shifts and everything in between, we're here for the stuff you didn't know you needed to hear.
Crushing it, stuck in a rut, or just trying to keep it together? We've been there.
So get ready to laugh, learn, and level up. This is Go Figure. Let's do this.
Welcome to Go Figure, a new podcast series here on Chillin' with Ice. This podcast is where fitness, wellness, and real talk collide. I'm your host, Lori Fetrick, along with the incredible Ashley Randall.
All right, guys, welcome back. As you already heard, we introed Kelli, and we are so excited to have you here, Kelli. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Yeah, we are too. I think mental health has become much more of a hot topic over the years. I think before it was so taboo. For different people, for different reasons. You know, for me, it's always been something that has been very like welcomed in my life. I mean, I think my mom put me in talk therapy, play therapy when I was, barely 2 years old because she wanted to probably make sure that she wasn't fucking me up. I was raised by a single mom. And so I think she was like, okay, let's get somebody else's opinion in here to like make sure that this kid's okay and talk and work through emotions and stuff. So for me, my whole life, it's always been a very comfortable thing, but I encounter people all the time that it is like an immediate almost red flag. Something's wrong. What's wrong? I don't need therapy. Therapy means something's wrong. Like it's a very, I don't want to do it because that means something might be wrong with me. And then something wrong with me means,
Something's wrong with me.
yeah. I would love to hear kind of your take on that and maybe how even that has shifted over the last several years, especially since COVID. I think that was a big wave of people realizing like, okay, we need to like talk, we need to work things out. We aren't all just okay as we would like to kind of pretend that we are.
And you tell us the story about why you came about this as well, because your sister actually unfortunately committed suicide in 2017.
So I'll start kind of, I'm thinking as you were talking, it's the labels that we put on people or that we maybe put on ourselves or society puts on us, like I'm crazy or something's wrong with me. And nobody wants to be labeled crazy, which actually kind of goes or ties into a little bit of my story and why I do what I do. But we definitely have seen a shift in mental health, and it is kind of that buzzword, but a lot of people I feel like don't really understand what mental health is.
Mm.
So I'm going to start there and then I'll go into my story.
Yeah.
Mental health, it's our brain, right? We all have brains. We all have mental health, but we don't all have a disorder or a disease or a challenge, as I like to call them, because with challenges and a lot of mental health challenges, it is something for a short amount of time or could be something that we live with or experience over our lifetime,
Mm.
and not all of us have them. So I think that's the first important thing for people to know is we do all have brains, we all have mental health, but we don't all have a mental health challenge, disorder, disease, illness. And so we have to keep in mind that we could at any point in time, they 1 in 5 Americans have a mental health challenge throughout a year. And so it is much more common than you would think. We just don't want to talk about it
Yeah.
because we don't want to be labeled by society as crazy
Right.
or whatever else we want to call people. And that kind of ties into my story with my sister who did die by suicide in 2017. I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know what to do. I actually did label her as my crazy sister. I always said that she was over dramatic. She was one of
I
those
think we all
people.
have one of those,
Yeah.
except you.
Yeah, one of those. She always was looking for attention, posting everything on Facebook.
Mm.
And unfortunately, she had attempted suicide 6 other times. And I just didn't
Oh.
know how to help her, what to do, what to say. And when she did complete, I started diving into everything and anything I could possibly
Mm.
understand about mental health and suicide because generally there is a mental health challenge underneath the act of suicide. And so being educated myself has actually really helped in my healing journey, which led me into starting my nonprofit in 2018, which the name is Make Mental Health Matter. We actually just did a rebrand. We were BCC Evolution. That means nothing about mental health. So we changed the name to actually align with what we do instead of people thinking we dealt with evolution or I don't even
Yeah.
know what they thought it was.
I got you.
I guess if I heard BC, yeah, I would be like, is this like about Christ? Like, are
Right,
we having a revolution? What's
exactly.
happening here?
Yeah.
We go through our lives every single day, and especially being women. I mean, a lot's thrown at us, a lot. And we do have hormonal imbalances and things like that. And hormones play a role in this. So, how do you detect whether it's an actual illness or if you're just going through a season?
The easiest way to say that is the time and the frequency. So if it's an extended period of time, so depression, if we talk about depression, we can have depression in short snippets. But once we have depression for 3 or more weeks, that's when it transfers or translates into an actual mental health challenge. So
Mm.
it's based off of frequency and time. And really that's where it like shifts into the actual medical diagnosis. But that's not saying that just because you have say long-term depression that you're not ever going to recover. And I think that's a part of the conversation that we don't talk about as often, is that hope and recovery. There are certain diagnoses that you will always live with, and that's the frequency part and
Got
the
it.
time. It's a much longer time period, but there's also people that have learned certain self-care or
Yeah.
strategies to not have it be um so hard in your life. So I always talk about the live, laugh, and love. And those are the things, if it's affecting the ability to live, the ability to laugh, or the ability to love, that's when it shifts into more of a diagnosable mental health challenge.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about your sister?
Of
Was
course.
she on any medication going up to this? I mean, since she tried 6 different times.
Yeah, we actually, my family, we kind of knew it was over a period of years. She had gone into mental health facilities, and finally it had come to a place that we felt like she had the right cocktail
Mm.
of prescriptions. And come to find out, because I didn't see that it was coming, and neither did any of my family, but come to find out she had actually taken herself off of the prescription medication.
Mm.
And my sister was diagnosed with MS towards the end of her life. And I know that she was constantly taking baths and she was always in pain, but she was a caregiver for a paraplegic and did CPR classes. And I
Wow.
think just at the end of the day, I look at it as she had nothing left for herself.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of other things happening during that time as far as a relationship breakup. And I think it was just like one of those topple effects of nowhere else to go. And that's what I think was the ultimate thing that came together and why our family never really saw, because she knew if we found out that we would have called
Mm-hmm.
somebody to, whether it was go pump her stomach or admit her. And I just think she kind of hid it from our family towards the end.
I had a very good gladiator friend that was on our team, Siren, that actually was very, very bipolar. And she had battled with it since the time she was 2. And off and on meds, off and on meds. And after the gladiator season, probably about 5 to 6 years later, unfortunately, she committed suicide. And it was because she was off her meds. Same thing happened. She was in a hospital, actually, believe it or not, when she committed suicide, which is mind-blowing to me that they can commit suicide and hang themselves in a hospital without, I mean, where's the supervision?
Right.
You know what I mean? You're in a mental health hospital,
that's
kind
wild.
of thing. But she battled with it for just years. I mean, just unfortunately. And then you have that kind of diagnosis, but then you have another diagnosis to where it's like one of my girlfriend, one of my girlfriends, my girlfriend's best friend, actually, no clue, nothing, 2 kids, husband, out of the blue, boom, just committed suicide. No warning, no nothing. I mean, it was just like a shock to everyone. So yeah, it's this subject, you're right. It's kind of like normalizing it and talking about it and talking to people, and that it's okay to talk to people. And then you have other people like my mother. Okay, my mom, getting older and things like that. And it's like, I'm done. I'm pissed. Screw this shit. I'm going to commit suicide. We heard that as kids growing up our whole life, and that was like a cry for help. And we already knew that. And we also knew she had a zest for life. And maybe that's the other thing. And maybe that's the question that's coming around here is, how do you know when somebody has a cry for help or if it's really deep and serious?
Yeah, and I mean, I love this conversation, and I know that it's a hard conversation for people to have, but I think that it's really important because the more we know, the more we can help people. And when you get to that place that you're like deep in this hole that you can't get out of, and or you're looking to get some help, it is, I mean, I always say I take everything serious at this point in my life. I don't care if you're just joking about it and you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go kill myself," or right. I take everything serious because you never know when that plan has been in place and what that small thing is that I say like could break the camel's back,
Push them
right?
over the
Because
edge.
yeah, you never know. And I would much rather have somebody mad at me because I called to do a welfare check or I called and had them talk to 988 than I would much rather have them mad at me than have them dead.
Yeah.
And so I think that breaking down the stigma and having these open conversation, because honestly, suicidal thoughts are actually much more normal than you would think.
Oh yeah.
Oh God,
And
yeah.
if you're driving down the road and you're like, I could just drive off the road and nobody
Wait, I
would
thought that was
notice.
my thought.
Yeah. Lori's had that thought many times.
Yeah, and or
Yeah.
I just want to sleep and I don't want to wake up.
Right.
That's much more common for people because we get really tired, we get really exhausted, and it feels like it's the only thing that's left. But honestly, it's the difference is when there's action behind it,
Yeah.
when there's a plan in place. And the way that we can start opening up those conversations is being really direct, asking the question, are you going to kill yourself? Are And that is a question that people are like, wait, what? You want me to say that to somebody? Yes, I want you to say it
Yeah.
as direct as possible. Are you thinking about suicide? Are you going to kill yourself? Because the more direct, the more clear that we can be with the brain, the more likely we're actually going to get a response. And if somebody is saying these things, we also have to be careful with the words that we say. Because with parents, if we're saying, well, I'm going to go kill myself. I'm going to go kill myself. Now you're putting your kid in fight or flight all the time because
Right.
now they think that your parent is going to leave you. And the other thing that I love to train people, because in society we say commit suicide, but changing that verbiage to died by suicide or death by suicide because when we're committed to something, it's more of like, I'm committed to a facility, or I'm committing a crime, or I'm
Mm,
committing a sin. So even just slightly changing our verbiage and using different words
yeah.
can really be helpful too.
That's actually cool. I like that shift because you're right. Like if you say someone committed suicide, it does feel like it was a very, to your point, like committed thing, but it was just maybe the choice that they made in that moment, not something that they were. I mean, I guess ultimately they were fully committed to it, but yes. Okay, so I'm curious because, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but when you say, we all have these thoughts and then it's the action being taken on those thoughts. I guess even for someone who's listening, who maybe they might be thinking, oh, yeah, I don't know, I have suicidal thoughts or I've thought about this. I mean, even myself, like there was a time when I was in a terrible, terrible relationship. And I remember thinking, if this is what the rest of my life would be like, I would rather not be here anymore. Now, was I fully prepared to take my own life? No. But I remember thinking, if this is what every day for the rest of my life is going to look like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have this life. And so I'm curious in your experience, like where, and maybe there isn't a perfect answer, but where does that shift kind of happen where someone is like, okay, yeah, this really sucks, but I maybe do have the mental health tools to get myself out of it, or this really sucks and all I can focus on is how much this sucks. And to me, the only option
Mm-hmm.
out of it is to not be here anymore. Because, again, like you said, I think it is very common to think, oh, I'm in debt or my marriage is terrible or that, like, oh, fuck, if I just erase myself, everyone's else life will be better and like mine won't be as
Well,
painful.
especially in this climate. I
Yeah.
mean, like in our climate, now and the way the world is, and it's chaotic, and everybody's kind of like, "Wah!" And it's like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
Holy
So
shit.
how, I guess, how do you feel that people, like, where is the decider?
There's been a lot of scientific research, and I'm not a research person, but I know some of the details really behind that. The suicidal action thoughts are very time limited,
Mm,
and when we shift from, if this is going to be the rest of my life, I would rather not be here, to now I'm going to take the action to die by suicide, and this is how I'm going to do it, when I
mm,
do it, where I do it. That small shift could happen at any point in time, but the important part of this is that if they have community or connection or a tribe or people around them that support them, they're more likely to not take action, because they've also shown that community and connection are those two things that actually save lives.
mhm,
And it doesn't have to be medical professionals, it can be everyday people like you and I that can actually save a life, because we could be in that space where it's like that shortened amount of time, and us just acknowledging their feelings and showing them that somebody actually cares and gives them the time to listen to their story, whatever it is, without judgment, can truly save a life. So it's giving that piece of hope, the
okay.
piece of
Hmm.
hope that tomorrow can be a different day. And although you're in this relationship that's really super crappy right now, how can I help you to find a way out of it, to give you that piece of hope? And I think that's where the difference is, and where we can fit in as humans to help save a life.
And how do you go? I mean, again, because someone might be like, I mean, even the example that you gave, about April's friend, like, what if you don't know? Like, what if this person is seemingly great? They've got kids, they've got the
And
family,
isn't
they're
that
all of
usually the
these
way it
things.
is?
And then all of a sudden you're like, I wouldn't have even known to have the conversation with you to check on you. I wouldn't just be like, hey, Barbara, hey, let's get a latte. Oh, by the way, are you planning on killing yourself? Because you don't even know that Barbara's there. But so how, I guess, can you show up for people without being like, oh, great, here comes Ashley asking me every day, like, are you going to kill yourself
Or
today?
what are the signs?
Yeah.
What are the signs you look for?
Yeah, generally there are a lot of signs, and I talk about this really from my own personal um, experience. Is that I said that I didn't really see anything, but in retrospect, now that I look at it through the eyes that I have,
Mm-hmm.
I see my sister unraveling. So my sister was somebody who was very upkept all the time. Every time she came to a family event, she always had her hair done, her makeup done. And the Christmas before she passed, she looked very disheveled, very
Mm.
tired. She wasn't, interestingly enough, I don't have any pictures of her from that Christmas. And I usually took or take tons of pictures of my family. And so it's one of those we may not know in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but generally people show something, whether it's in hygiene or it's giving away personal items,
Mm.
it's maybe talking about death or dying. It could also be as simple as shifts, especially when we talk about youth, is like maybe they're a straight A student and then all of a sudden they drop, or vice versa. Maybe they're a really horrible student, then all of a sudden it was like life is great, everything is perfect. And you're like, wait, what just happened? And especially as a parent, you're like, oh, okay, well, now they're getting better or
Yeah.
something, however we look at it. But mood shifts are generally the ones that we maybe don't see as often, but it's really practicing our noticing skills, and even those super slight changes in behaviors or words that we say or moods that we have. Those are things that we can start practicing noticing more. But yes, there are situations that it just happens with no notice, without any signs, but more often it's just that we don't know how to recognize those. So there are like lists and lists and
Yeah.
lists of signs that you can look out for, but those are the ones that I usually like to bring up because they're a little bit not easier, but you kind of can grasp onto them a little bit better.
Do you have a list of those like that we could attach here? Yeah, that'd be awesome. We can
Yeah.
Yeah.
attach them on the show notes so that even if someone's just curious or maybe they have someone
Oh,
in their life and
absolutely.
they're like, let me just kind of scan through this and see like if there's someone that they might be like, oh, I want to talk to you about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you noticed that there is maybe in a demographic type of way, like more women, more men, maybe midlife crisis, a profession, like Ashley and I were talking before this, and it's like, I heard that, one of the professions out there that has a very high suicide rate are veterinarians. And she came back and went, wait a minute, I
I
heard that
heard
was
it
a
was
dentist.
dentists.
you know?
Or like
Yeah,
people that
it
live in Seattle, it's always been the
Oh,
thing
yeah,
that
I've
like,
heard
oh,
that.
if you live in Seattle, like super high suicide,
Because
so
it's there's no sunshine.
right. And they
And it's
just,
depressing.
they're like, I can't take this anymore.
research shows, and it has shifted within the last couple of years. The highest rate of suicide currently is actually white men,
Hmm.
older white
Hmm.
men or middle age. It used to be, so youth was pretty prominent. And I know in Colorado, which is where I am, suicide is the first leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yes, it's very,
Very
Whoa.
very
bad.
young and it's getting younger and younger. We have started to shift that though, which is great. It hasn't statistically changed anything yet, but we are starting to notice that youth themselves are talking more often, which is great. It makes me look forward to the future that we're actually having these open conversations. But white males are the highest currently. It is for Colorado, my theory, this is, I don't know if this is true or not, but my theory is being at a higher altitude, we have a little less oxygen that gets to our brain, which causes brain function to be a little bit lower. Yes, those places that people live, that it's more seasonal or
Mhm.
rainy. Colorado, we have a lot of SAD or seasonal affective disorder
Mhm.
because we have winter months, but in Colorado, it's actually sunny more than people think it is
It's so
here.
sunny. I just moved
So
from there. So
sunshine
yes,
is
it's
good.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, very sunny there.
Yeah. But it is. It's, I mean, there's lots of statistics that are shown based off of where you live, how often the sun shines, and how happy people are or not happy people are, and then oxygen based. But it is, it currently the highest rate is white male.
And that's interesting you say that about the oxygen rate into the brain and everything. I started kind of doing a little research last night, like, okay, let's look at some hormonal issues, and like women going through perimenopause, estrogen's dropping, the testosterone, serotonin levels. I mean, I guess my question would be, well, how would you know if it's a hormonal shift? Because there's many women that go through this and you get very sad and very depressed and you're just like, that's when I wanted to drive my car off the road, by the way. Versus, okay, well, wait a minute. This person may be on the border of bipolar. How would you know if you should be checked for bipolarness?
So, bipolar is a disorder that is hard to diagnose because it has so many different components and layers in it. Specifically, it is also one of the highest diagnosis that is misdiagnosed, interestingly enough. But when we talk about hormones, and this is actually a conversation that I just had with somebody the other day, and something that I hadn't thought about. I am going into, I mean, I'm premenopausal, and I was thinking because she said that she had attempted while in menopause because her hormones specifically. And I didn't think about that actually. For whatever reason, I had not thought about the hormone levels, but I do know that plays a significant role, especially with women. And if we're not having the right balance of hormones, then we go into that depressive state, which is harder to get out of unless we get the replacement hormones or therapy. So I don't want to say that I'm an expert by any means on that specific topic, but I do know that it plays a huge factor. So if your doctor doesn't give you the information that you need, advocate for yourself, advocate for others, and go talk to another doctor. It's kind of like I talk about therapists. You want to like have a date or like date your therapist because they may or may not be the right one for you. The same goes with the doctors. If they're not giving you the right answers, make sure you advocate and go talk to somebody else, because it may be hormone based. It also could be a diagnosis. And if you don't feel right about whatever they're saying, ask somebody else.
Yeah, but then I'm going to take that and run with it for a little bit, because of the fact that if you just go to a normal doctor, and I've heard many women go to a normal doctor and they're like, I don't feel like myself. I feel sad. I feel depressed. I'm gaining weight. And all of a sudden they'll go, oh, you're fine. Here, take this antidepressant pill, instead of addressing their hormones, because it's now, thank God, it's like really becoming a conversation right now with women's hormones in the last 2-3 years. And it's got to become louder, just like you're talking about, you got to have that uncomfortable conversation about suicide. Well, we need to have more conversations about the hormones with women, because they're sad, they're depressed. And yes, that can lead to something really significant, possibly suicide, because they don't know what it is. And a doctor's just going to say, here, take this pill, instead of addressing their hormones. So when you say that, a lot of people, I want to say that once they go to their doctor, God, it's really sad to say, but they trust them too much.
Yeah, I think you can. I definitely think you can, trust your doctor, or put too much, white coat syndrome, think like, okay, they've got it all figured out.
Yes.
But Kelly, I think you made a huge point, is like, yourself better. Like if you're saying this isn't normal, or I don't normally feel this way, I don't normally have suicidal thoughts, I don't normally want to sleep all day, I don't normally, then it doesn't really matter what the doctor tells you. You have to kind of keep staying on that thing and keep listening to yourself, and not just say, because it's almost the opposite. If someone were to be like, oh, you're crazy, if you're like, well, no, I'm not crazy. This is the same thing, but just in the opposite pendulum of like, okay, you're telling me I'm fine, and I'm telling you like I'm not fine, like something is wrong. And I think it's better, but I think there was a time when advocating for that it was more just hush, hush, you're fine, be okay. And now it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to keep saying, no, this isn't working, or no, this isn't making me feel better. Or like you said about the therapist, I've got a really good girlfriend who is a therapist, and she says all the time, like, if you know right away if that therapist is going to work for you. And I think some people, they don't like therapy because they're not with the right therapist. And it's like, okay, well then you have, like you said, you have to date them, find out, maybe you go in there and you say, hey, these are the things that I want to work on in these sessions. Can you help me with that? And maybe the therapist says, no, that's not my cup of tea, or I don't work like that. Okay, then you find somebody else, but don't not like therapy because
I love
you don't
therapy.
like the person that you're talking to.
I love therapy, but yet my therapist, I got rid of my last therapist, and I know she doesn't listen to my podcast, so I can say this. But it's like I sat there and she was like super cool, and I'm like, I was like, you'd be a great friend.
Yeah.
Instead of, and then we'd just shoot the shit and talk, and then I'm like, all of a sudden, wait a minute, here's $200 for what?
Yeah.
I could have talked to Ashley. So I was like, you're done.
Yeah. But it's true, and kind of even I think what you were saying too about people that are on that verge, that like tightrope, you were saying about suicide. I think somehow, not all, but I think they probably get pretty good at seeming like they're okay. And I've even been in that same position with a therapist where I'm like, I know the things to not say to you today, because if I share this, you're going to push. So then if you can do that with a professional, then of course you can do that in a friendship relationship. Of course you can tell your friend, oh yeah, no, I'm fine. Or, oh yeah, da 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 da, because they're just a friend. So if you can, trick a professional, it's okay, we've got to really think like, why am I not sharing this? Why do I not want to talk about this topic? Why is this a trigger for me? And it's not an easy thing, I think, to navigate at all. We are kind of our own worst enemies sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and I again, personal experience. So last year I started having migraines. I usually only get like 2 migraines per year, and I got 7 within 4 months. Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
And I went into the doctor and I was like, something's not right. Like, this is not normal. They did the blood work, they did all the tests, and she's like, no, you're great. You're fine. It's you're within normal range. And I'm like, am I really? Because I'm at that age, that perimenopause and all the things. And I actually went to their more holistic. I tend to work more on the holistic aspect or collaborate with holistic partners because for whatever reason, they tend to know a little bit more because you have more time than that 15 minutes that you go into the office and they're like, yeah, let's do this, and this. And we can give you, like you were saying, is that prescription medication. But that's not what I'm looking for. Like, I'm just looking for understanding. And if you're not sure, then I'm going to take the information to somebody else that's more on the holistic level, and they can read my blood work and they can tell me that, hey, no, you actually are in fact perimenopausal and you're not going crazy, right? Like, that's how I was thinking. I'm like, something's wrong and you're not telling me as a medical professional about these things. So I went and advocated for myself and asked somebody else.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What was your migraines from?
They're medical concierge, and they work with women in menopause and premenopausal. And they said definitely it is because I also am having trouble with my brain fog and all the things. So they're like, yep, you're premenopausal. So I was like, okay, well, at least I know.
For the listeners, if they're thinking, okay, I'd never been in therapy, maybe they're in a relationship and they want to work on that. My girlfriend, who is a therapist, like I said, she always encourages that you should start therapy. It's like your house. Like, you don't go and start to fix your roof when it's a storm and like it's pouring into your house. Like, you should check the roof for leaks before the storm comes. Same thing with your like relationship or your life. Like, don't maybe wait until it's an absolute catastrophe. Doesn't mean you can't get into therapy, but sometimes it's better to just go when everything is okay, because then when shit hits the fan, you have the tools, you have the person, you have the resources, versus I'm in chaos and crisis and I need to help. So what would you guide somebody listening thinking, I don't know, maybe I do want to try therapy. Maybe I do want to talk to somebody, or I'm not happy in my marriage or my job. How would you guide them to start that path? Because I think for a lot of people, it's overwhelming. You're not just like, oh, can you tell me the referral for your dentist? It's like, it's a little bit more intense to be like, hey, I need a therapist. And maybe their insurance doesn't cover it. Like, I think there's a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through sometimes to start the mental health process that can be overwhelming enough, especially if you are mentally overwhelmed.
I believe that mental health is just as important as physical health, and it should be treated the same way. So, just like you go to your doctor, your dentist, your chiropractor, you should be going to, whether it's a therapist, psychologist, counselor, right? There's different levels of mental health professionals, and you have to find the right one for you. Maybe right now you're just talking to a counselor. Maybe then you start feeling worse and you want to go to a therapist, or maybe it's just a coach, somebody
Can you
who
explain the
is.
difference of that? So explain, like, what's the difference between a counselor and a therapist?
Or a coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, so counselors are going to be kind of your entry level, I guess you could say. They are the ones that you can talk about anything general.
Okay.
Then you go to a therapist, which is a little bit more targeted. So maybe you have a specific, like depression or anxiety or a diagnosis. Um, that was when you would go to a therapist. They're going to give you more targeted
Mm.
therapy. And then psychologists are ones, most states psychologists can prescribe medication.
Right.
So they would be the ones that you would go to actually get the prescriptions and the full diagnosis if you are having an illness, disorder, disease. And then if you want to coach, so like for me, I am a coach in neurolinguistic programming, and I work in the wellness space. So mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations. I am not a counselor. I'm not a therapist, although I'm a like a alternative psychotherapist, but I work more in the coaching. So it's not, I don't take insurances, which most coaches don't. And you may think of a coach like a life coach or a relationship coach. They're not licensed generally and they don't take insurances, but they can be very helpful. Just make sure, again, that you search out those people that have the credentials behind them, because I feel like in today's society, everybody says they're a coach, but we want to make sure that they really truly have the education behind it.
Yeah,
Welcome
that kind
to
of
the fitness
flows right
industry.
over to the fitness industry.
They're like, I lost 5 pounds.
I'm
I
a
saved
coach
my sister
now.
from suicide. I'm like, I don't actually think that means you can save everybody from suicide. But okay, yes.
So, Kelli, what role does fitness and exercise actually play in prevention, let's say?
It is huge. It cannot be understated. I and it's whatever movement. It doesn't have to be in a gym doing the hard things. It could be simply standing up, moving your body. It could be dance. Like one of my favorite is dancing in the kitchen, like nobody's watching. Hopefully nobody's watching.
We're all watching.
Right. Everybody's watching. Yeah. But it's the movement of your body. And I know when I say this, I have had many people that are experiencing a pretty deep depression, and it's hard for them to just get out of bed,
Yeah.
or it's hard for them to just move, period. But the simple steps that we can take will help our mental health. And I've had a couple people that they're like, if anybody else tells me to go take a walk, I'm going to punch them in the face. It's true though. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't want to impose on other people what works for us, but we can merely suggest, hey, I've heard that body movement is really good. I've heard that getting outside to get fresh air is good. Obviously, if they're in the middle of New York, that may not be the freshest air, but we want to make sure that they're having some sort of movement, and physical movement fitness is really great for your brain, which is your mental health, because the mind and body are connected. Therefore, they do affect each other.
That's awesome. And it's interesting because as you were talking about that and not being able to get out of bed, when people feel super sad and depressed, it actually physically hurts. It's a very strange thing. And there was a commercial on a while back, and it was like to the point, and I was like, oh my God, that's so true. And it like physically inside, you can feel this yearning,
Yeah.
weird pain in a way. And you're just like, God, I need to get this out. I just need this
like
to
you're
go
sick.
away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I know everybody has, varying degrees and no comparison necessary, but I can relate to that where it's like you're so depressed and you're so almost just dead. Like you feel it's like nothing matters. It doesn't matter, what food, it doesn't matter the sun. You're just like, I don't care. Like my brain is mush. I could just literally lay on this couch and do nothing. Even that is almost exhausting. Like it's just mind numbing. But I feel, I'm sure they get tired of hearing it, but it's a game changer. I mean, even just when I'm sick, not
Moving,
anything
yeah.
wrong with, mental health, even if I'm just sick physically, sitting in the sun, it's like, oh my gosh, like that felt so good. Like that just felt like, it's like you feel your cells and your body like recharging.
You know what else feels good? Is when you get in your car and turn your radio on and sing super loud to
Yeah.
it. It just like releases something
Yeah,
for
it
some
is.
reason. If you're in the shittiest mood or you're sad or you're depressed, I always tell people, turn on some kind of
Yeah.
music that excites you, that you love.
Right.
That you can sing, like,
Yeah.
even though you can't sing, you can sing to the top of your lungs.
Right.
But it releases. And I think what it does is it releases the serotonin in your brain and it makes you feel good.
Well, it also changes just that you're not that stagnant moment. You're not kind of stuck or fixated on the thing that's depressing you. It's changing your environment.
So switching your focus.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I went outside, or okay, I this, or I went, it's just the environment has been completely shifted. You're dancing, you're physically moving, you're, whatever it might be, not in this rut of like, I watch these depressing shows and I eat this snack and I lay on it's like, well, yeah, that's gonna feel kind of depressing after a while. Or I go to I drive the same route home every single day, or it's like, okay, then shake it up. Maybe you drive a different route home, maybe you play a different song, maybe you like you said, maybe you like lifting weights, but if that becomes something that seems monotonous, yeah, maybe you take a dance class and you feel silly and awkward in there, but you're like, oh my gosh, like I also kind of feel a little bit more alive. This is different than just what I've been doing.
It's definitely, I mean, just any way to move your body. I had a guest come on my show and she said the simple getting up from your desk and going and filling your water bottle during the day is helpful for your mental health
Yeah.
because it physically makes you move. And so when you have like giant Stanleys like I do, you don't want to move all the
Kelly,
time.
that thing is huge.
Like, get a smaller version, make yourself get
Yeah.
up and get a glass of water because the physical movement helps you. It helps your brain. And it is important for us to move, although sometimes our mental challenges can manifest physical ailments.
Mhm.
And so that's a lot of what you were talking about is that they do. They go hand in hand. And we can become sick due to our mental health challenges. So how can we change that up? And one self-care strategy that I love giving everybody is simply smiling, because we always have our mouth with us. It doesn't ever go away. But the upward motion of a smile releases what I call our brain's happy juices, which are the serotonin, the dopamine, the endorphins, and a simple upward motion of our mouth, even if it's faking it till you make it, that can help release those chemicals, which ultimately put you into a happy state. So
Yeah.
if you don't have anything else and you don't want to get out of bed or you don't want to move your body, simply smile. Find something that you can smile about and or just fake it till you make it. And if you do that over and over and over, it actually triggers your brain to release those happy juices.
So what would you tell somebody now that so many people are working at home? Working at home, they're not with people, they're not with the community, they're alone, and there's like no communication. They might be online. They might not even have to talk to anybody during the day. And yet they're in their house. All of a sudden they'll go, oh my God, I've been here for 5 days and I haven't spoken to anyone. To me, that I could absolutely. I'm sorry, but I would probably fall into a depression.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, and you're literally you're in your pajamas, you don't dress, you're like, do I really need to shower? Okay, it's been 3-4 days, nobody's seeing me, I'm not leaving the house. I mean, seriously, you start going down that rabbit hole.
You got to get a dog.
So what would you tell people?
That's what I would say.
Like, I know, right? Or
you got
a
to
cat.
get a dog. You got to go outside. You got to go for a freaking walk.
Killer cat right here.
You need to have a reason to go outside.
But what would you say to people as far as like they're working at home now? This is our environment. So many people are at home. I mean, how would you address this if they start feeling funky?
I love, because I think the pandemic showed us that even introverted people need people. We are mammals and we crave connection. And even the people that have much more introverted energy, they're even finding now that they need that connection. So I would, like, we were all just talking about, is change up your routine. How can you change it? And if you're starting to smell yourself, right? Go take a shower.
Clue
I
number
know
one.
it's easier said than done, but really truly step outside. Put on, I don't know, in our house we have those snuggie things that you can just pull over and walk outside. Change it up. See how you can change your routine. I know for me, I was working at home and I finally had to go get an office because it was affecting my mental health. And I always say that my coworker was an asshole because he used to bark at me, my dog.
Oh, her dog was the coworker.
Yeah. I'm like, he used to yell at me all day long and bark. But no, truly, I mean, pets are huge.
Yeah.
Even if it is a cat or a dog will get you outside. But either way, how can you find that connection? And if it's something that you really truly can't find a connection, what is something in your community that you could challenge yourself to go be a part of? Because you may find out that you like it.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Kelly, the work you're doing is amazing. And the more people out there like yourself, I mean, we need them. And I'm very sorry about your sister. That is a tragic, but at the same time, something really good came out of it. And that's you and the foundation. So thank you. Thank you for being out there and sharing all this information. And we're going to put all your information into the show notes, everything, to where they can contact you, what your foundation is. What else would you like to say? What else would you like to
Well,
put out
I
there?
just thank you so much for having me on. And I think that all of these conversations are really important conversations. And sometimes it's really hard to start the conversation. It's
Yeah.
also hard to ask for help. But I really, truly want anyone listening to know you're not alone. And I know that we say that a lot in society today, but really, truly understanding that there are people out there that want to help, that want to open up those conversation. And when we know better, we can really do better. And that's across the board with whether it's mental health, suicide, self-care, physical fitness. We can make a difference in the lives of ourselves and others around us. And you don't have to be a professional to do that.
That was beautiful. That was perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kelly, for being here and for doing the work that you do.
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure.
I appreciate you guys so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you for being on Go Figure. So appreciate it.